A couple of weeks back, I took our antweight robot Bigfoot to its last MRCA qualifier of the season. We're hoping to win some fights in order to increase our rank to get the best matchups we can at the beginning of finals. And I was also hoping to get some stick time. That way I was as fresh as possible going into finals with, my familiarity with the robot. We were feeling pretty good based on some of the robots that were there. There were a couple robots that we were pretty intimidated by, including Cuttlefish, Scrubadubba, and Midnight. We didn't make any changes to the design since Bots and Brews because we were feeling pretty good about it. So without further ado, let's get into the fights. So our first fight is against a two-wheeled vert called Cuttlefish. We haven't fought them before, and they also made some design changes going into this event, so we weren't really sure what to expect. First fight of the day, we're both sort of getting our bearings. Able to get a pin early on, so I'm feeling pretty good. Release it, pops us, but we're still on our feet. Able to push him across the box. Not quite able to get him where I want him to. You can notice his weapon assembly is sort of wobbly right now, but it's still spinning. Pops us up again. Here he takes off a wheel and pops us upside down. I drive into him to self-right, but he ends up getting stuck in our back end. So it's worth adding that since we lost our front left tire and our back left tire was actually kind of off-centered, we can't drive super straight, which I find out really soon. And we just sort of I don't know why I drove backwards in that situation. I think I was trying to drive backwards into the right, but instead I just went straight into the pit. And that's not a great way to start the day. Before we move on to the second fight, I should remind you that BetSpots runs modified Swiss, meaning that we do 4 qualifying rounds, and if you get 3 wins or more, you move on to the single elimination bracket. So us losing our first match, we need to win the next 3 in order to qualify for the bracket. Our second fight is against a wedge called Revolutionary. Since they don't have forks, we're feeling pretty confident going into this one. We're able to get control pretty easily. And when we flip him over onto his back, his wheels can't touch the ground. But I decide to be nice and unstick him since I'm feeling confident and he's just a kid. Can't drive super well, so we can kind of do whatever you want. End up backing him into the corner or into the side. Hold the pin and then turn around, and then I sort of flip him back onto the kick plate. And I feel like dragging this out would not be nice, so I just sort of end it there. And we get a knockout in the second round. So our third fight is against a two-wheeled drum spinner called Ankle Grinder. We start out trying to be aggressive, get across the box pretty quickly and smother him. Unfortunately, I have metal forks, so each time he hits us, they end up pushing the forks downward. They end up bending downward. And later in the fight, you'll see us start to get stuck because of it. For finals, I definitely want to print out some TPU forks for these sorts of matchups. We're able to start kind of being able to push them around a little bit, the forks get stuck there. Not able to get him in the pit, but we're able to get a pin driving backwards. Able to get him stuck there for a second, but he doesn't end up staying because he's able to gyro off of it. Sort of pushing him around a bit. We end up getting flipped upside down, and because I didn't practice it enough, I'm forgetting how to self-right. I'm just pushing sticks in the wrong direction. But luckily, he isn't able to really capitalize, so eventually I sort of end up giving up and decide to drive into him. And he isn't able to, he's just sort of like, we're both sort of all over the place, so he isn't really able to gain points. I'm still staying aggressive. The wheel comes off, and like I mentioned before, I didn't actually end up switching out the wheels from the first fight. So the one wheel ends up coming off easier, and that second wheel is wobbly, so I can't drive straight. After this fight, I do switch those out because I knew I should have done it earlier, but I was complacent. Popped up again. This one ends up going to the judge's decision. Walking away from that fight, we weren't sure which direction it was going to go, but we ended up taking that one. Looking back at that fight, I think it was because we were more aggressive the whole time, and we definitely did more to dictate the pace. I think the pins early on definitely made a huge difference, and when we were upside down, he wasn't able to capitalize at all. He wasn't chasing us down as much he probably should have been or could have been, and we only took a little bit of damage. The one wheel and the bent forks. So before we move on to the next fight, I'd like to let you guys know that I am back to streaming again, 7 p.m. on Thursdays. Most of the time I will be just doing CAD to give you guys a chance to get an early look on what I'm working on and to ask me questions, but I do have other things planned, and so subscribe if you want to see what's going on there. So our fourth round fight is against a wedge bot called Delirium. He is a NHRL mini bot. So he's able to get underneath us a lot easier than we can get underneath him, at least going straight on. We pretty much need to come at an angle in order to get underneath him. He nearly gets us in the pit at the beginning. So we are able to get underneath him in certain situations. Unfortunately, we get stuck on the floor. The forks get caught before we can try to get him in the pit there. That's how most of this fight goes, is him pinning us, because the geometry is just difficult to contend with. I was running it as a flipper, not trying to grab him. I don't know how much difference it would have made. At a certain point, I end up trying to get him in the pit since I'm losing. And here we are, able to get him in the pit and use the lifter to get them the last little bit. His wheel ends up touching the ground, so it ends up counting as a knockout for us. Unfortunately, it doesn't look quite as impressive because I accidentally backed into his forks as I was trying to back into him to push him the rest of the way in. But either way, through a combination of luck and clutching it, I was able to move on to the single elimination bracket. So for the first round of the single elimination, we end up getting pitted against Cuttlefish again. We end up getting fast out the gate, get underneath him a little bit, but we ended up showing our side to him, which is not good. Get popped upside down. I forget how to self-right again, which apparently is an ongoing theme.
Your one fork's keeping him at bay.
End up messing up. End up remembering there how to self-right. Getting the bad end of that hit, which honestly is kind of unlucky. And yeah, he keeps getting our sides. We lose a wheel. Get a pit in, so that's good. We're still in it. At this point, at least. Still got good control because our wheels are actually straight, or control of our own robot. Again, he keeps getting the sides, and I forget how to self-right, so I just drive into him. Again, he ends up flipping him upside down even when we're facing him. Self-right correctly that time. We lose the top plate here, and then we get stuck. If I had a nickel for every time Cuttlefish got stuck in the back of my robot at Bet Spots that weekend, I'd have 10 cents, which isn't much, but it's weird that it happened twice. So I forget how to self-right again. We get almost a pin. And Here's where we get knocked out because he ends up hitting the wires. I arguably should have tapped out once I lost the top plate. I end up losing a Malinky in that last hit, so that kind of sucks. I think the reason that looked so much worse than the first fight is he ended up getting along the side of us more than last time. And for whatever reason, a lot of the front-on-front hits did not go our way, and we end up getting flipped upside down a lot. We actually spent more time upside down, I think, at that event than we have at all of the events this season combined. So I definitely need to practice driving upside down and self-righting before finals. I think I got complacent because I wasn't flipped over all that much. Ultimately, the event didn't help our rank at all. We ended up staying right where we were. We gained like 2 points of ELO. But I think we did learn a lot. It kind of forced me to reevaluate, like I said before, about practicing driving upside down and self-righting. Also, not being prepared to fight a real drum spinner like we did in that third fight. And so I want to print out TPU forks before finals because I know Blackout is a pretty scary drum spinner that I want to be prepared for. I also want to create a special configuration for control bots because I was already planning on printing out a light version of the front and back so I can have weight for a titanium top plate for hammer saws. And I want to use the lighter front and back for a special configuration against control bots where I actually have 4 forks instead of the 2. Maybe that'll help against bots like Delirium. I guess we'll find out if that makes a difference. But hopefully, to give myself a little bit of edge against in control v control matchups, because currently our record against other control bots isn't as good as our record against other bots, I don't think. We also brought a plastic ant called Jackalope to this event if you want to see how that was built, because it was one of Team Malice's designs, and also how it did. Click the video on screen now.